Socio-cultural theory by Vygotsky and Michael Alexander Kirkwood Holiday. The socio-cultural theory is a psychological and sociological theory developed by Vygotsky. He's a Russian psychologist in 1934. The theory focuses on the importance of society and culture to shape and develop individuals. So the idea is to see what are the social factors that contribute in the development of one's own individual personality or perception of life. According to Vygotsky, a child already has innate biological characteristics. So the innateness and the existence of innateness is not denied by Vygotsky. He says that yes, the child does possess that, but it is the society that provides him tools for intellectual adaptation. Now that tools or the facilitation or the aspects they vary culture to culture, and they provide learner with the input in the form of experiences, in the form of information. For example, in one culture, maybe the students are required to remain passive in the class. Maybe in the other culture, it's the learner or the students who take assertive participation and who take charge of their own learning process. Some teachers, or in some culture, maybe the outdoor activities are more encouraged, whereas in the other culture, it is the indoor learning that is more. So all these practices, they vary from culture to culture, and they are the tools to shape up or to act as facilitation for the intellectual adaptation. Vygotsky believed that learning takes place at two levels. One is through interaction with others, that is social level, then integrated into the individual's mental structure, that is psychological level. Every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on at the individual level. First between people, and that people interaction is interpsychological. And then inside the child, it's intrapsychological. Now this applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to the formation of concepts. All the higher function originates as actual relationship between individuals. So we see that according to Vygotsky, there are two levels, social level and psychological level. Social level is the interaction between people, and then later on that information is processed in the mental structure or in the mind, having the ability to be attentive, to retain logical information, and then the formation of concepts. Now all the higher functions, basically in terms of communication, that is higher function, complete communicative competency, it originates as actual relationship between individuals. Vygotsky introduced zone of proximal development, ZPD. Zone here is the area of exploration where the learner has the ability but requires help and social interaction to fully develop. Now we have already discussed this zone of proximal development in our earlier lectures, that the learner having the existing ability but needs to move on to the optimal level of performance. In between that, there is a gap, there is an area where the learner requires assistance, and that assistance is provided socially from the teachers, from the parents, from the friends and peers, in the form of scaffolding, collaborative learning, modeling, and discourse. So the social interaction or the assistance is something which is there in the form of a very core component of the socio-cultural theory. M.A.K. Holiday, a British linguist, developed the concept of systemic functional linguistics in 1960. The basic philosophy of this approach is that language is a resource for making meaning. Language is considered as a tool or vehicle to create meaning. Three levels constitute the linguistic system in systematic functional linguistics. One is meaning, which is semantics. then sound, that's phonology, and wording, that is lexicogrammar, which includes syntax, morphology, and lexemes. So there are three levels which actually constitute the linguistics or the systemic linguistics in the functional aspect of this particular theory. According to Holliday, language metafunctions refer to ideational, interpersonal, and textual components. Ideational is the language construes human experiences, which means that language interprets or explains and represents human experiences. Interpersonal is the language enacts human relationship, so it performs or it represents human relationship. Textual is language creates discourse. In terms of the understanding of a particular text, language acts as a discourse, provides all the linguistic markers and cues to come up with one's own interpretation and judgment of a particular text. The clause is the basic unit of analysis. Ideational means what there is to argue about, a process and its associated participants. Now they create or they constitute ideational aspect. Interpersonal, something you can interact with, a unit which may provoke a response with the hearer or reader. So interpersonal is something that you can interact with, a unit which can lead to some kind of response with the hearer or the reader who is engaged in the process of particular communication. Textual is the word order, punctuation, etc., which shows the limits of the clause. So meta functions, as you can see, all these three aspects, they carry out very specific functions without which the meaning is incomplete or the meaningful expressions are incomplete. Systemic linguists advocate claims about language that language use is functional. The very purpose of the language is to carry out certain function. That its function is to make meaning. So those functions are carried out to convey a particular meaning or to form meaningful expressions. That these meanings are influenced by the social and cultural context in which they are exchanged. So, as you can say, language performs a function. Function involves meaning, and the meanings are influenced by your surrounding. A particular context, a particular situation that requires that particular linguistic competency or a language expression. That the process of using language is semiotic in process, which means that the purpose of language is to create meaning. It's a system of meaning, a process of meaning by choosing. And in order to create that process, you have to choose what particular words or vocabulary you are going to choose or you are going to adopt or use in order to convey your intended meaning, your intended language expression. To conclude, Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory claims that learning is a social process and social interaction plays a fundamental role in the development of cognition. Holliday introduced concept of systemic functional linguistics, which refers to language as semiotic and semogenic system.